The Sonic.EXE Hell Reborn mod just dropped, and in this video, I want to give you the backstory of all the EXE characters presented in this mod, and also some fun facts about certain characters. Let's start off with the first character we see, which is actually Lord.exe. Now, contrary to popular belief, Lord.exe and Sonic.EXE are not technically the same character. For what we know about Lord.exe thus far, he is actually an extraterrestrial being originating from the space between universes, or aka the Void. And even though technically Lord.exe can take on any form that he wants, he has this weird fascination with Sonic the Hedgehog, which is why he looks like a monstrous version of Sonic. My theory is that this has a lot to do with Lord.exe's personality. He's very methodical, very intelligent, and I think he believes that if he takes on the persona of a hero, people will be more likely to trust him. And this ties in with that twisted personality that he has. He's like if you gave a very smart but demented child endless power. And in turn, he sees humans and other creatures as toys. And I mean this in a literal sense. Lord.exe likes to play games with his victims that are obviously rigged against them. And if they lose, Lord.exe will basically devour their soul and their actual bodies. I always say that Lord.exe is one of the scariest versions of Sonic.exe because he basically will erase you from existence, literally. The next character we're going to speak about is going to be the actual Sonic.exe, and he is definitely the most well-known EXE character. Most of you probably know Sonic.exe from the Creepypasta, which also got turned into a video game. You may actually remember watching Markiplier play it back in the day. I know that was the first time that I was introduced to it. Don't run! There's also been a ton of animations featuring Sonic.exe that clearly show his demonic personality. Now, many people believe that Sonic.exe is a demon that is actually possessing Sonic, but that's not technically true. EXE is a completely different entity that is more similar to Fleetway Supersonic as opposed to the actual Sonic. I say this because just like Fleetway Supersonic, EXE is completely obsessed with Sonic, and also obsessed with unaliving characters and animals alike. Something that is unique about Sonic.exe is that he just wants to kill for pleasure though. It's not like he's killing because he wants to replace Sonic or because anybody has done any wrong to him. It's simply based off his whims. You may have also noticed that Sonic.exe changes his form in this mod. In this version of Sonic, it's called Xenophanes, and some of you may know it as Beast-Sonic because in previous mods that's how he was referred to, and he even had like a beast-like form. Now this version of Sonic is one of the most aesthetically pleasing versions of Sonic.exe in my opinion. We literally get to see him sprout additional quills on his body that turn lavender. I always like to joke that he looks like a hedgehog trying to turn Super Saiyan. And one thing that I find kind of awesome but creepy is that you can actually see his face start to stretch. And in turn, you can actually see pieces of his skull around his eye sockets. And one thing that I noticed that the developers did a very good job of in this mod is showing the differences between Lord.exe and Sonic.exe. We get to see that Lord.exe is definitely more methodical, a bit more sneaky with his thoughts and his actions. While Sonic.exe is definitely very abrasive, he's very impulsive and definitely vicious. And we get a very strong showcase of the viciousness that Sonic.exe can inflict on people by looking at Tails, Knuckles, and Dr. Eggman in this mod. Now, some of you are probably curious to why these characters are broken and zombie-like and literally missing limbs. And to understand this, you have to understand the backstory of the Sonic.exe creepypasta. Basically, the creepypasta takes place like this. There is a character named Tom who received a copy of this video game from his friend Kyle. His buddy Kyle told him to get rid of the game because he couldn't do it himself and to not play it. But since Tom was such a huge Sonic fan, he of course disregarded his friend's advice and booted up the game anyway. Now, Tom noticed something strange from the very start. The background screen was like this red, cloudy image that was super weird and ominous, and also the three playable characters are Tails, Knuckles, and Dr. Robotnik, which usually that third character would be Sonic, which was another red flag that Tom completely ignored. And it became very clear after playing with each character and going through their storyline that Sonic.exe was simply chasing these characters down and killing them. What makes it even more creepy though is that each of these storylines were attached to some type of game, as if Sonic.exe thought that they were playthings. We see this start out with Tails, where Sonic tells them that they're going to play hide and go seek, which basically just turns into Sonic chasing you down, and we assume lunging at you because the screen cuts out then and all you hear is this god-awful scream. We see this continue with each character, going over next to Knuckles, where he puts a rule on Knuckles saying you can't run. And then we see that Sonic plays this weird game of tag with Knuckles where he keeps disappearing whenever Knuckles gets close enough to touch him. And the game ends with you playing as Dr. Robotnik, where you're in this Castlevania-like castle and you are basically running through until Sonic finds you and kills you. Now, I explained the creepypasta and why these characters are dead, but that doesn't explain why they are alive and well in this Friday Night Funkin' universe battling Boyfriend. And the answer to this is actually really simple. It's because Sonic.EXE uses his power to bring these characters back to life and force them to do his bidding. And this relates back to a quote that Tom said in the actual creepypasta that reads like this: "This Sonic was a monster. A pure, evil, sadistic, all-powerful, nightmarish, demented monster. And all his victims, including Tails, Knuckles, Robotnik, and possibly Kyle, are just his little toys. And the game is the very gateway into his chaotic, nightmarish world and the very hell his victims are trapped in." So ultimately, the reason that Sonic.exe has so much power here and is able to bring these characters back to life is because Boyfriend and Girlfriend actually stepped into his realm, that being the video game realm. And in this universe, Sonic.exe is basically a god, like he tells us in the creepypasta. And this explains why he rips all these characters up and basically leaves them mangled zombies. Since he thinks so highly of himself, it also means that he doesn't think very highly of these other characters, meaning that tearing them apart doesn't really affect him and he doesn't really care. But the thing that I love about this mod that we haven't seen in any previous Sonic.exe mods is that the corrupted characters actually start to take a stance against their tormentor, aka Sonic.exe. We actually see Knuckles, Tails, and Dr. Eggman fight alongside Boyfriend in order to defeat their tormentor. And while it is a small detail, it is kind of cool to see these characters trying to take back some of their autonomy and break out of their chains. And since we're talking about characters that are basically prisoners, this is a perfect opportunity to get into week 2, which has Sally.EXE, Cream, Amy, and Rouge. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that Sally.EXE is actually a prequel to the game Sonic.exe. Whereas obviously in Sonic.exe, we got to see Sonic take out Knuckles, Tails, and Dr. Eggman. In Sally.exe, however, he takes out Cream, Amy, and Sally. And now, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know exactly which creepypasta this version of Sally is from, because in the mod, she looks basically like this huge animatronic. When I first saw her for a second, I thought I was looking at Roxy from FNAF. And usually when we see iterations of Sally, even in her EXE form, she's more of this petite little chipmunk. But I'm thinking that the development team just had a little bit of fun with her in this mod. Now, something in this mod that is very consistent with her actual backstory is that she seems to be subservient to Sonic.exe. In the mod, we see her say that she even was sent by Xenos to actually take out Boyfriend. And in many of the creepypastas, Sally is either married to Sonic.exe or just one of his slaves, pretty much. And one dark fact that you may not know about Sally is that in this mod, you can actually see that when her eyes are closed, it looks like there are stitches there. And that is because Sonic.exe actually destroyed her eyes at one point. But Sally is so brainwashed that she still believes that she loves him and that he's somebody that should be served. And this also seems to be the reason that she's holding Cream and Amy hostage. Now, interesting enough, we see that Amy in this mod actually has one half of her face sewn together. And from my understanding, this is simply from the abuse that she suffered from Sonic.exe, but there's no actual description as to how she physically got the injury. One thing that is kind of inspiring about this version of Amy is that even though she's been beaten and basically turned into a slave, she still has her kind heart, and we see this by the way she interacts with Cream. Amy basically takes on the big sister role and tries to do her best to make sure that Cream stays relatively happy, especially considering the situation that they're in, which is basically a hellscape. And this hits even harder when you realize that Cream is definitely the youngest character to be introduced in the Sonic series. I think there's 2 iterations of her, and one of them is only 6 years old and the other one is 10 years old. No matter which version of her this is, she's basically a baby and she's put in one of the worst situations imaginable. With this information, it probably makes more sense now why you always see her crying in this mod and looking so helpless. She is one of the few EXE characters that is actually a child. The last character that we need to talk about is going to be Rouge the Bat, and this character is interesting because I didn't know a whole lot about her before I started researching this mod. What I do know about her though is that she's a bat, which I thought was very interesting, and she's also a jewel thief / spy. Something else that I find interesting about her is that her motivations are usually in question, meaning that you can't really tell which side that she's on all the time. But what you do know for sure is that she's usually looking out for herself. Now, with that being said, in the series, apparently she has come to the rescue of Sonic and even some of his friends. And in this particular mod, I think she actually is on the side of Amy and Cream. Because just like them, she also seems to be a slave, not only under the control of Sally, but also Sonic.exe. It was also very cool to see that just like Tails, Knuckles, and Dr. Eggman, we get to see Rouge, Amy, and Cream actually fight with Boyfriend in order to overthrow Sally. Now, I know a lot of people are curious as to how Boyfriend and Girlfriend managed to resist the corruption that is Sonic.exe. And for this, I want to refer you back to other Sonic.exe mods and also the power that Girlfriend has. I know it's kind of weird that they're able to get out of so many situations, but we got to remember that Girlfriend is actually pretty powerful. And I imagine like just in the other mods, she probably put a barrier around herself and Boyfriend, which basically made it to where unless they lose the rap battle, they're pretty much safe from Sonic.exe's power. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out one of these videos on the screen here, and I'll see you tomorrow with another one. Peace, peace.